Okay, now we discussed yesterday Machshavas Pigul, and we broke it down into a number of different subcategories. We spoke about a Machshava Shelo Bizmano, which means that he thought he'd eat the basar after its allotted time, or Shelo Bizmano Nadam, that he would be Zorik the Dam after Shkia. He had a Shelo Bizmano Machshava, alternatively in the Emurim, and he's going to burn the Emurim on the Mizbech after Alos HaShachar. We also had Chutz L'Mkoma, which although it doesn't generate an Isur Kares, but nevertheless it passes the carbon and is categorized as Pigul. And that would again mean that either he had a Chutz L'Mkoma for the basar, that it would be eaten outside of the Azara. He had a Chutz L'Mkoma for the Dam, that the Dam would be somehow, we couldn't figure out exactly how, but he would do the Zrika of the Dam outside of the Azara. Or the Emurim would be burnt on some place, I don't know what, maybe on a bama or something, I don't know, but outside of the Azor. Now we go on to the question of Shvicha Shirayim. So we're on the top of page Chaf Aleph on the left column. And as I indicated yesterday, Shvicha Shirayim, according to the final Maskana Halacha, is not critical. And therefore, I would be hard-pressed to think that there's a psul of Machshavas Pigul with regard to Shvicha Shirayim. And the case is, Chishev al Shvicha Shirayim, lasosam chutz l'zmanam chutz l'mkom. And he quotes a Gemara in Zvachim Adaf Yud Gimel. And he says that Machshavas Pigul applies even in this case. And I guess what we're saying is the following. I mean, the best I could do right now at this Basher Husham is to say that since Shvicha Shirayim is at least a mitzvah, then from that perspective, it becomes an integral part of the Avodas HaKarban, and the Psul of Pigul applies. Im chishev al avodas kabbalah veholacha ein zu machshavas pigul. Now, what we're trying to figure out is avodas, a psul of pigul applies to any avodah of the four avodas. So if he has that machshava of chutz l'zmano, chutz l'mkom. But with regard to Shvicha Shirayim, there's a specific avoda, one of the four avodos, which generates a psul of pigul in a machshav of chutz l'zman of chutz l'mkom. And what is that? At what avoda do we say that there's a machshava haposeles of pigul vis-a-vis Shvicha Shirayim? That's only going to be at the moment of Zrika. Why? And this is complicated because Shirayim are poured on the Yesod HaMizbeach. And that means that we'll call it the Avodah of Shirayim, of Shvicha Shirayim, is something that's, in quotation marks, owned by the Mizbeach. It's in the domain of the Mizbeach. And the parallel avoda, which can be classified as exclusive Mizbeach, meaning the essence of the avoda, its very essential definition is Mizbeach oriented. That's Zrika. Now, again, we're not talking about any sort of equation between a Maisa Zrika as the fourth of the four avodos and Shvicha Shirayim. I mean, that's totally different one from the other. But we are talking about the same heft, not the same Maisa, but the same heft. The heft of the dam lends itself to two different avodas. One is called zrika, and the other is called shvicha shirayim. And both are engendered by the chefetz the dam. So when we talk about pigul in a general sense of chutz zman or chutz komo, then we incorporate all four avodos in the psul of machshavas pigul. And the reason for that is because to be mafagel the carbon means that this carbon was set up as chutz zman or chutz komo. Any one of the four avodos, all of which are related to the akravas hakarbon, will engender a psul of pigul. However, when we talk about shvicha shirayim, that's a very limited kind of an avodah, and it's related to the dam. The other avodos, like for example, Kabbalah Sadam or Aloha Sadam, they have nothing to do whatsoever with shvicha shirayim, because the Aloha Sadam and the I should start the other way around. The Kabbalah Sadam and the Aloha Sadam are all part and parcel of the akrav of the carbon. After the akrav of the carbon, there's a special din in the dam that any shirayim left in the mizrah, left in the receptacle, after he was mekayim the zrik al gabi mizbeach, needs shvicha al gabi hayisod. So therefore, in chishev avodas kabbalah v'holacha, if his machshava regarding the shirayim was that it should be chutz zman or chutz komo during, when did he have this machshava? During the Kabbalah or the holacha. The Kabbalah and the holacha are only leading up to zrika. Now, zrika again has a fundamental role in the carbon, and therefore Kabbalah and holacha likewise are the avodos that set up the carbon as a carbon kosher. That's true. But that's not related to shvicha shirayim, because shvicha shirayim has nothing to do with the zevach itself. It's a separate chiyuv vis-a-vis the dam of shvicha shirayim. And therefore, a machshava during Kabbalah or holacha of chutz zman or chutz komo of the shirayim, it does not engender a psul of pigul. Oh, and he says it even clearer than I did. He says, shvicha shirayim b'chlal azrika. Shvicha shirayim is an extension of zrika. In other words, the chefetz of the dam in the mizrach divides up into two segments. There's one segment which is zrika segment, and the other is shvicha. Again, they're two different ma'asim, as we said before. Shehi gam achilas mizbeach. In other words, just like zrika gives the dam to the mizbeach, so to the shirayim are given to the mizbeach, and a machshava during zrika of chutz zman chutz komo with regard to the shvichas hadam will engender a psul of pigul. Ach, avodas kabbalah v'holacha eina b'chlal achila. In other words, the avodos of Kabbalah and holacha are not included under achila. Because they don't have that same status as zrika is concerned. And the zrika basically is the first stage of achilas mizbeach. I mean, we'll have another stage, which is called haktaras ha'imurim. Umachshavas pigul hi rak umachshavos shel achilas adam v'achilas mizbeach. And the zrika is related to achilas mizbeach, but not the Kabbalah and the holacha. That's not called achilas mizbeach. Now, Rabos, I have to tell you, this is not simple at all. This is extremely complicated because at the end of the day, you cannot set up achilas mizbeach without Kabbalah and holacha. Just like you can't set up zrika without Kabbalah and holacha. So it would be more logical to assume that Kabbalah and halacha like zrika are all part of the process that sets up achilas mizbeach. But at least in zrika, we could say it has an advantage that in itself is an achilas mizbeach. The dam itself is given to the mizbeach. And that leads us to a linkage to Shirayim, where the shvicha is also a kind of achilas mizbeach when the Shirayim are poured on the Yisod mizbeach. Now, we're going to complicate his machshava in the case of Pigul. The simple case of machshavas Pigul is that the basar will be chutzim zman or chutzim komo, but the same achila, which we'll call achilas kohanim, would apply. What happens in the more complicated case of machshavas Pigul, where although he does have a machshav of chutzim zman or chutzim komo, but it's for the sake of klavim. The machshavas Pigul, I'm skipping one paragraph for a moment. He thought about the basar, but it's going to be fed to a dog. Or another possible scenario. And this he quotes from Sugim Zvachim Daf Lamed Al. So let's understand the chidush here. If Pigul means that you take an achila and based on your machshava, you restructure that achila, send it down a different path of chutzim zman or chutzim komo, that's nicha. That I understand is Pigul. But here, he's not taking the achila of the carbon, which would be, let's say, achilas mizbeach or achilas adam, and setting it up as chutzim komo. He's talking about an achilas kelev. That's what he has in mind. And one could ostensibly argue that in the case of achilas kelev, he's changing the rules of the game entirely. It's like what happens if he would have a machshava that the horns or the root or the hoofs of the animal should be chutzim zman or chutzim komo. He would make up a whole new story. So he's not using the chefza of achila, whether it's mizbeach or other, and setting it up as chutzim zman or chutzim. He's talking about a whole different entity of achila. But the answer is it doesn't matter. It definitely will generate a psul of Pigul, because at the end of the day, he's taking the dam or the basar, chutzim zman or chutzim komo. Whether he's burning it on his local campfire, whether he's feeding it to his dog, it's irrelevant. He is setting up a chutzim zman or chutzim komo on the bus of the car. Now let's rewind to the previous paragraph, if we skip. What happens if he makes a switch between the basar and the emurim? Chishev al ha'emurim she'ochluhu adam, or chishev al basar laktiro b'mizbeach. That's not Pigul. Why? Machshavas Pigul hi rak im chishev al ha'emurim shedinam lahaktir al gabi mizbeach, or chishev al habasar shu lachilas adam, and he had a machshava chutzim zman of chutzim komo. But if he has a machshava on the murim that they should be eaten by Adam, or on the basar shenechal Adam that should be burnt on the mizbeach, that's not machshavas pigul. Now, again, from a psychological point of view, what difference does it make? Lamaisa, what word do I want to use? It's going to undermine the entire carbon, because he's taking basar that was meant for Adam and he's designating it for the mizbeach, or vice versa. But it's not pigul. And if it's not pigul, it doesn't passel the carbon. Now, intuitively, psychologically, you would say for sure this should passel the carbon. He's making such a fundamental upset of the carbon. But we have a category called machshavas pigul. Now, in the footnote, he quotes a Mishnah in Zvachim Lamed Hey that quotes Rabbi Eliezer, "Shemechashvin me'achilas adam le'mizbeach u'me'achilas mizbeach la'adam." And it seems that Rabbi Eliezer, in fact, would accept pigul in this case, when he switches it in his mind from achilas adam to mizbeach, or vice versa. Now, I'm wondering, does Rabbi Eliezer require another condition to be met? It's not only that he thought that the basar li adam should be burnt on the mizbeach, but he added a chutzim zman or a chutzim koma. Because when you think about it, whether it's achilas adam, let's take Kodshim, which is in the Azara, or achilas mizbeach, which is on the mizbeach, obviously in the Azara, it's the same makom. Again, I don't think I can construct a case of chutzlas mano. Oh yeah, we can talk about chutzlas mano as well, because you can have a separate zman for the emurim, for the aktorah on the mizbeach, and a separate zman for the achilas habas. I mean, a classic case would be shlamim, where the haktorah would be on the first night, but the next day lends itself to achilas habas. So I'm not sure if Rabbi Eliezer, when he expands the application of pigul, machshavas pigul aposeles, to the case of midbasar li adam lemizbeach, or midbasar lemizbeach li adam, if you have to add chutzim zman or chutzim koma. I don't know. Maybe according to Rabbi Eliezer, there's an automatic machshavas pigul when on the basar he's machashev that this basar achila should be burnt on the mizbeach. That itself constitutes pigul. Chishev ala basar nechal shetochleu h ala mizbeach. Now I'm confused, because that's exactly what he quoted here in the name Rabbi Eliezer. It's not Chishev ala basar nechal shetochleu h. How is this different than the previous? So let's read the next line and see if we can put this together. Here it wasn't Beloshan HaKtorah, but rather Achilas HaEsh. Esh And he's assuming like the Rabbanon against Rabbi Eliezer, and a machshava on basar, a nechal, faktor al gabi mizbech, is not pigul. And we thought that meant that it's not pigul because he's changing the rules of the game, so to speak. He's sending the carbon down a different pathway. But now I see that that's not correct. And even the Rabbanon agree that there's a machsheves pigul if you switch the mode from basar hanechal to basar hanikta. However, if you use the word haktara, that's when the Rabbanan say you've gone too far. You've created something that is outside the entire league, out of the ballpark here. Because there's no such thing as haktara on basar nech. You're inventing something that doesn't exist. It's not like chutzim tzvan or chutzim komo, where you have, whatever you have, and then you just change the machshava. The machshava changes the zman allotment or the makom allotment. But to talk about haktara on basar nechal, taking basar nechal, putting it on the mizbeach, I mean, that's ridiculous, so to speak. It's not something that could be incorporated into the mechanics of avodas hakodshim. Because there's no such thing as haktara with regard to basar nechal. But if, on the other hand, he leaves out the haktara, and instead he uses the word achila, so what he's doing is, it's like similar to the case that we had of klavim or of eshel hedjot, and he's saying that the basar hanechal should be consumed by the mizbech, not as a haktara, because that's impossible, but as an achilas ha'esh. And once again, I have a feeling he's talking about chutzim zman or chutzim koma, but he doesn't spell that out. I don't know. Chishev al ha'imurim she'ochlu klavim ein zu machsheves pigul mishum shemachsheves pigul al ha'imurim Irak bi'achilas mizbeach v'lo b'shar achil. So when we were talking about basar hanechal, and his machshava was shochlu klavim, that we said is machshavas pigul. But if we're talking about not basar, but rather we're talking about a murim, so a murim al manash shochlu klavim is not a machshavas pigul. Why not? How is it different than Ishem al basar nechal al manash yochlu klavim? We said it is pigul. Mishum shemachsheves pigul al imurim irak b'achilas mizbeach v'lo b'shar achil. Says machshav chutzim zman or chutzim komo with regard to imurim has to be on the mizbeach. And once again, I think what's going on here is that in this particular scenario, he's changing the rules of the game. You're talking about basar that's designated for the mizbeach. Okay, you can have chutzim zman or chutzim kol, but now you're telling me it's not designated for the mizbeach. You've decided that it's going to feed your dogs. That's not a machshavas people. And again, I don't think that this is necessarily intuitive, because on the contrary, he seems to be, if I can use the psychological term, zilzul. He's even more of a zilzul. You're taking something that deserves to be burnt on the mizbeach of Hashem, and you're feeding it to the dogs. I mean, that's something like our enemies would do, that they came into the Mikdash to machal the Mikdash. I mean, what greater chilel could there be in terms of desecration that you take a murim that are earmarked for the mizbeach, for the Aktoras HaYimurim, and then you decide to designate it for Achilas HaKlovim, but nevertheless, it's not a Machshavas Pigul, because again, Machshavas Pigul works within the framework of Avodas HaKodshim, just that it was a Machshav Chutzim Zman Chutzim Kol. So you tampered with one of the very important, but nevertheless one of the details as to when and where it could be. Here, you're telling me that you're going to take basar that's designated for Aktar al-Gab Mizbeach and feed it to the dogs. That doesn't even register. It's like min v'sheino mino eino chotzitz. I'm not disturbed by something it's not even close to being correct. If it's close to being correct, just that, you added it after alos hashachar or a little bit outside the azara, that disturbs me very well. Because every other part of the avoda is being done properly. But if you want to take basal aktora and call it achilas klavim, feeding it to the dogs, that's not competition at all. That doesn't disturb me. In terms of the level of zilzul, of desecration, it's about as severe as you can get. And this paragraph about Yochleu Klavim in a Murim is very similar to what we said about a Murim Almanas She'achlu Klavim. 1 second. No, what I mean to say is, if it's a basar hanecha, I think what's going on here, and this is again going to sound very strange to my ears, and I assume to your ears, is that achilas haklovim is an achila, but a murim requires haktara. So if your mindset is that you're going to take the murim and feed it to a dog, that's not a haktara at all. So you've got to be within the parsha of haktara, and then we could slap you with shalom and koma shalom, chutzim koma chutzim zmano as people. Mashenkin and basar necha, where we're not talking about any mizbeach over here, we're talking about the achila, the kohanim, or the bailim. In that context, achilas haklovim shmei achila. Now you can never talk about achilas klovim shmei aktara So with regard to the Emurim, the Machshavas Pigul has to be for Achilas Mizbeach. But with regard to Achilas Adam, Achilas Klovim is also considered an Achila. It's not Mufka from a Shem Achila. I'm trying to think of an example. I have it somewhere in the back of my mind, but I can't. Where Achilas Klovim Shmei Achila. I think has to do with Zroim. Like in Zroim, you might theoretically have a mitzvah achila, and you could feed it to the dog. I don't know. Okay, let's just make a note. See, where do we get up to? This I don't understand why that should be considered Torah, and how is it different than your love? Yochlu klavim, we spoke about in terms of achilas adam. Now we're talking about a murim. A murim requires achilas mizbeach. So what's yochlu eshel hedja? Why? I mean, we just finished saying that chishev ali murim sheyochlu klavim ein semachshavas. So why in chishev ali murim shetochlu eshel hedja? As he's saying eshel hedja is also called hakar. So again, in a murim, we have to have some sort of relationship to haktar. Yochlu klavim is not related to haktar. It might be an achila, but it's not haktar. But if it's eish could be considered haktar. I mean, I find that difficult, but it's an eshel hedja. Why is that called haktar? So he quotes this in the name of Minchas Chinuch. You'd have to really go and study the Minchas Chinuch. Okay, then. Let me just put this down here.